everyone, welcome to today's episode. Today we are very lucky to have Dr. Anna Robbie. She's with us somewhere behind the scene, and she has a PhD from nutritional science. She's also a former athlete, and she's very active. She exercises every day. Before I move on, make sure you check the description below, all the detail. My website, confidenceperformance.com. If you like to have the free course, it is confidenceperformance.com/free course. And also checks Dr. Anna Robbie's information down in the description, as well as the blood test link if you like to go for a blood test. Let's learn from today's episode. It is about why do athletes should go for a regular blood test. Why is it important? How should we do that? So let's invite Dr. Robbie to be with us. Hold on. Hi, Dr. Anna Robbie. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience. We are all very excited to hear from you. Also to hear from your research finding, why it is important to have blood tests and what kind of blood tests should we do or should the athlete do, and who should we go to, and so on. So first of all, I would like you to introduce yourself, because I think if when you introduce yourself, you can tell more about yourself.
Well, I appreciate that. So I'm Dr. Anna Robbie, and I am a registered dietitian and an exercise physiologist. I have a background in exercise physiology and also nutritional sciences. And after my undergraduate degree, I got my bachelor's degree at Cornell University. I went on to do a combined PhD in registered dietitians combined program. So I was able to do my internship to get my registered dietitian's credentials while I was working on research and get my doctorate. So I studied human metabolism. And so I'm really interested in how the human body works, especially in the context of exercise. So I'm really interested in how exercise influences how your body works, and that also affects your blood. So we'll get into that more today. And after that, I went on and did some research at the National Institutes of Health, or the NIH, out in Bethesda, Maryland. And I worked there for a while doing some human trials. And then I started my private practice, and I also began working with Athlete Blood Test, where I'm now their chief research officer. So I'm really interested in working with the athletes, trying to figure out what's going on with their blood, with their bodies, and how we can get humans to essentially perform their best in an athletic context. So I'm really excited to be here with you today, and we can chat all about the good, the bad, and the blood.
Wonderful, wonderful. I wish I met you before, when I was an athlete, before this time. I wish I know someone who is really expert or specialized in nutritional physiologies and nutritional science, so that I can ask for more opinion. The reason why I said that, because when I was an athlete, I competed at the 1992 Olympic Games. Prior to that, I won the Asian Championship and won many other international medals, gold medals at the Southeast Asia Games for 4 times consecutively. I worked so hard, I pushed myself so hard, especially when you are a student athlete. So I was a student athlete. I did not take time off from my studies. I studied and compete at the same time, like hand in hand, without any time off or any gap year. I didn't take any gap year. I just moved on hand in hand, studies and competition and training at the same time. It was really, really hard, but I persevere. But at the same time, when I push myself, I persevere. I knew that I had very strong mental skill, strong mentally, but then I felt that sometimes my body just cannot follow. Even though you have a very strong mind, sometimes your body has to follow. Even though you can use your brain to control your body, somehow physiologically you may not able to handle, right? That's why I think the importance of blood tests comes in. Yeah. So before I move on to share more about my stories, I would like to learn from you, and then in between I'm going to share with you what happened to my blood tests. So how about you tell me more about why should we do blood tests? Like, why should athletes do blood tests? And how often should they go for blood tests?
Yeah, so blood testing is a fairly new, phenomenon in the athletic world outside of like professionals. So professionals and Olympians have had access to blood testing for quite a while now, but it's only, been fairly recently that athletes can now go and get their blood tested who are just, exercising recreationally. Maybe they don't even identify as an athlete. They're just going to the gym. Well, I say just going to the gym, but they're exercising, maybe 4, 5, 6 days a week. And that's definitely going to affect their body, their physiology, and how it's working. And so we have really worked on bringing the science to athletes now. So it's really important because we don't know what we don't know, right? And so when you are exercising, when you're training, whether you identify as an athlete or not, your body is changing. And that's part of what makes us fitter and faster and stronger, is that our bodies change and they adapt. But what's interesting is that's going to affect, your blood work. And so as an athlete or someone who's exercising, you want to see kind of how your training volume or your training load is affecting your body and how it's functioning. How is your nutrition supporting your body? Are you getting enough of the right vitamins and minerals? Are you training too much or maybe not enough? Are you getting what you need to be supporting what you're asking your body to do? And so that's reflected in your blood values, because at athletebloodtest.com, what we do is we look at a very comprehensive panel of blood work. So we'll look at hydration, recovery. We'll look at, your training tolerance. We'll look at micronutrients. So you really get to see a good picture about kind of what is your body doing in response to what you're asking it to do and what you're giving it in terms of its nutrition. And so it's really important to see how that's panning out, because like I said, we usually don't know what we don't know. And so you could be low in several things or maybe high in certain things, but you don't necessarily have symptoms yet. And so it's really important to see, how is your body handling this? And if that means preventing something catastrophic down the road in terms of like a deficiency or potentially an injury, that can be really helpful to sort of circumvent and get away from, some potential downsides of being out of an ideal range for certain nutrients. So it's really important as an athlete, especially someone who's competing, to make sure that your body is sort of in the best shape that it can be. Because in a lot of sports, we can, spend money on certain things. So you can buy the fanciest running shoes or the fastest bike. But unless you have, a good foundation in terms of your body and your physiology, you're never going to be able to do your best. And so we really want to help athletes achieve their best and enjoy their sport along the way too, because a lot of times we don't see signs and symptoms until you get really far outside of that ideal range. So it's important to make sure that you're taking care of your body and making sure that it's sort of up to what you're asking it to do. And then you asked about timing, and it kind of depends on the individual, but there are a few times that you definitely want to get your blood checked. The first would be sort of in a baseline situation. So like in the off season, for example, maybe you're not training very much, you're just sort of exercising to stay in shape, but it's not your competitive season. This is important because it's going to establish a baseline for you, so we can see where you kind of naturally fall when your body's not stressed with the exercise. So maybe, for example, you tend to run a little high in some things and a little low in others, and that's just your body's happy place. Then we can see that in the blood work. And so we want to see kind of where you're at without that layer of exercise on top. And then another time would be about 6 weeks into like a heavy training season. So to see how your body is handling your training load. And then you also want to get checked about 6 weeks before your competition, whether that's a race, a meet, any sort of competition that's really important to you, because this allows us to make any changes to supplements or nutrition, recovery, that sort of thing, in order to kind of get you into an ideal range for these biomarkers before you go into your important competition. So it depends on the athlete. If you're not competitive, I usually recommend people get tested seasonally, so about once every 3 months, just to make sure that your body's getting what it needs and you're supporting it in what you're asking it to do.
Very interesting. So that every 6 months or every 3 months, we should go for blood test just to see where you stand. And what do you think about the timing of the blood test? Like timing, I meant period of time of the day. Like, should we go blood test?
Oh, sure.
in the afternoon or in the evening. For me, as a regular patient of my family doctor, they recommended me to go for blood test in the morning with empty stomach. So as an athlete, when is the best time?
Yeah, so I would agree with your physician. Usually we recommend that people get their blood drawn first thing in the morning after an easy day or a recovery day. This way, we're not going to see some artifacts of a workout that you just did. So for example, if you do a really hard workout and then you go and get your blood drawn, we might see some things that look a bit strange, and really your body's just fine, but it's, it looks a little different because you just exercised. So if you can get it done first thing in the morning, after like an easier day, we're less likely to see some of these artifacts from a workout show up in the blood work itself. And by doing it in the morning, it gives us a little bit of consistency too, because we have what's called a circadian rhythm, which is our body's natural kind of ebb and flow of certain nutrients and certain bioactive compounds within the body, or different hormones. So for example, cortisol, our stress hormone, that tends to be highest in the morning and then decrease throughout the day. And so by testing earlier on in the morning, especially in a fasted state, so you haven't eaten, you're not going to see some of these perturbations that might be a remnant of what you've done that day. Maybe you had a really stressful day at work, or you ate lunch really late or something like that could potentially influence the blood test results. So first thing in the morning is usually best, and just kind of get it out of the way too, so that way you can eat breakfast and kind of go on about your day.
Yeah, that's good to know. First thing in the morning. And from your experience, have you seen many high performance athletes take blood tests nowadays compared to last time, long time ago? How often?
Yeah, it is getting much more common. We're seeing a lot more people who don't necessarily identify as like a top end athlete, but definitely those who are pretty competitive are getting blood tested, I would say, fairly regularly. It kind of depends on their season, but yeah, I would say about every, maybe 12 weeks or so, to see how their blood looks in terms of nutrients, how it's handling the training, do they need to increase their training volume or back off? Those types of things are really important, especially for the athletes.
What did you find in comparison with the high performance athlete versus the recreational athlete? I don't know how many recreational athletes will go for blood tests, but if they do you see any differences in terms of their blood sample?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we tend to see a difference in terms of training load. So typically the higher end athletes who are training like hours a day, every day, we're going to see different levels in their blood for certain biomarkers, because their body is under more stress. But what's interesting is, so let's say we get someone who's a top end athlete and they're working with us for the first time, we might see a lot of things that are out of range. And then we have actually a runner she just qualified for the Olympic trials, and now she's been working with us for years. And her first blood test, there were a lot of things that were out of range. And, it was kind of a joke in terms of like, oh, there's a lot of things to work on here. But because she's tested with us, every couple months for the past few years, now, after a few blood tests, she was able to really kind of refine her nutritional strategy, her training, her recovery, any supplements that she needed. So now it's more of a matter of maintenance. And so we see like, oh, well, basically keep doing what you're doing, or maybe making small tweaks here or there. So at first, I think, some of these top end athletes, they start out with a lot of things that they need to be working on, but it's really easy for them to sort of get within that ideal range. Not all the time though. I've seen some top athletes who, in some professionals too, where they have a full team. So they have a sports psychologist, they have a dietitian, they have a whole team that's supporting them. And that makes it a little bit easier for them to get all of their needs met, versus someone who's recreational, who has a full-time job, they have kids, and they're trying to train on top of all of this. So it kind of depends on the person, their training volume, and sort of how much they have to support their needs in terms of recovery, nutrition, and training.
Oh, good to know. And what do you think about the blood samples detail? So what kind of blood sample do you always recommend or suggest the high performance athlete to take? or do you think the recreational athlete should take the same exact blood sample? What I mean is blood sample that consists of maybe vitamin D testing, maybe iron testing, something like that.
Yeah. So I would agree that the recreational athlete and the kind of higher elite athlete, they should be taking the same blood test, because you're putting a stress on your body with the exercise, which we know is beneficial in the long term. But again, if you're moving your body consistently, your body is going to be changing and adapting. And so we want to see how your body's changing and adapting in terms of what it needs, and make sure that it's being supported with that. So we look at a lot of different biomarkers, and I recommend, if someone is starting out for the first time, to get what's called the GOLD panel. And it's very comprehensive, and it looks at a lot of things related to training, recovery, and nutrition. So you get all of these components versus just going to the doctor. They might not necessarily look as much at a comprehensive approach compared to what we're doing. And so this is going to look at red blood cells to see how are they functioning, right? So do they look like they're a good size, or they're the right number, that sort of thing, because your red blood cells are what's going to help, give your muscles and the working tissue that fresh oxygen and carry out those waste products. So we'll also look at white blood cells, which is kind of a reflection of your immune system, your immune health, hydration, micronutrients, and training tolerance as well. And so there's a lot that goes into, a well-functioning body for an athlete. And so you want to make sure that you have a well-rounded approach to be supporting different facets of your needs, instead of just looking at micronutrients, for example.
Well, what do you mean by micronutrient? Also, what is a GOLD panel?
So the GOLD panel, so if you go to athletebloodtest.com, you'll see that they have different panel offerings. So the GOLD panel is kind of our comprehensive one that I would recommend people start with. So it'll make more sense if you look on the website. You'll see the different offerings that they have. So I would say that that's a good place to start. But in terms of the micronutrients, so these are going to be vitamins and minerals that we look at. And so iron is like kind of a separate section, but we do include that in the GOLD panel as well. So we look at both serum iron as well as your stored iron, known as ferritin. So in addition to that, we also look at, vitamin D, vitamin B12, folate, potassium, magnesium, sodium. And so there's a lot of different vitamins and minerals that are important to make sure that you're getting everything to support your body.
Are they specific micronutrients that are really important as an athlete, like high performance athlete versus the recreational athlete? For example, I know high performance athlete may need more iron. Is it true?
Yeah, so the more you're training, essentially the more iron you're using. And so you want to make sure that you're replacing that iron to be able to keep up with the demands that you're placing on the body. So, everyone's body needs the micronutrients, but it's a matter of how much you're training in terms of how much you're going to need. And so if, for example, let's take iron, because you brought that up. If you are running, let's say 100 miles a week, you're going to need more iron than if you're running 10 miles a week. So you want to make sure that, you're kind of basing your nutrition off of your training, and same thing with your recovery, to make sure that they're matched and you're not having, an overexertion from your training, or that you're eating maybe more than you need to in terms of like supplements.
Wow. How about iodine? I know many athletes, high performance athlete, actually they were diagnosed with hypothyroidism. There's I think a few American Olympic athletes, they were diagnosed with hypothyroidism. One of them is I think a former Olympian track and field athlete. Is it Jackie?
I'm not sure. I would have to double check to see which ones had hypothyroidism, but it is fairly common among athletes.
Oh, very common among athletes. That's very interesting to know. I would like to share my stories, because when I was an athlete and I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, at that time I was diagnosed in Canada. When I was in Malaysia, nobody knows, and we were not told to do any blood tests. Like blood tests for athletes is very rare, unless the athletes are sick, certain diseases. Otherwise, I don't remember we were asked to do any blood tests to see our performance or to improve our performance. So when I came to Canada, I realized I always felt cold. I gain weight easily, even though I don't eat much. I gain weight easily. And that symptom or sign already happened when I was in Malaysia, but no one knows. I didn't know. I knew that I got tired easily, and I push a lot and I got tired easily. I always have to use my mental training. I did my graduate studies in sports psychology, and sports psychology is my favorite subject. So I use a lot of mental training to overcome my physical weaknesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in Canada, and Canada has a winter season, and I always feel cold, even though it's not really winter time. And I went to see family doctor, and doctor asked me to do blood tests. And from the blood test, I was told that I have hypothyroidism. And I was so shocked. And I asked my doctor, I say, why? How come? What causes that? And the doctor at that time, that was in 1994, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And the doctor didn't know at that time, because I don't blame them. At that time, there wasn't any research about overtraining. I only found out more research finding about this, this overtraining that causes the hypothyroidism back in year 2000. Research started in about year 2000 in terms of hypothyroidism relates to overtraining or maybe over dieting. I don't know. Yeah, at that time back in 1994, the doctor said he doesn't know. It happened to people. So, and he asked me to take medication for life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why. And then he said, why? Because your body lack of iodine. Well, what is iodine so important? No, I knew that, but I wasn't realized that I will get the hypothyroidism, right? So what do you think about that? Like, what causes hypothyroidism? Do you agree that it is because of overtraining?
So, we can't specifically diagnose overtraining from a blood test specifically. We can see signs of overtraining and we can make suggestions, but, we're not a medical company, so we don't make any medical diagnoses. And if there is something that seems like it could be problematic, we always recommend people follow up with their primary care provider to make sure that they have all of their medical needs met. But we do see some signs of hypothyroidism in some athletes, and it can be tricky because sometimes we'll see low thyroid. We'll see an elevated TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. And basically TSH is trying to stimulate your thyroid, or, your metabolism essentially. And so it is, when you're under eating or overtraining and your body is not getting enough fuel, then, you're not getting that same metabolic output. So your TSH starts to go up because it's like, I'm going to try to get this going, but your body just doesn't have what it needs. And so we start to see high TSH and low metabolism because your body is just trying to do its best to keep you alive. And so, by under fueling, we can start to see some, decreases in metabolism with metabolic rate, and then signs and symptoms too. Like you mentioned, feeling cold all the time, feeling tired, feeling weak, maybe more irritable, hair, skin, and nails kind of start to deteriorate in terms of like the quality. So there are a lot of signs that we can look for that can sort of indicate that someone might be overtraining in terms of what they're asking their body to do relative to what they're giving it in terms of their nutrition and recovery.
I was so shocked when I was told that I have hypothyroidism. I started to read more about it, and I asked my family if we have this hereditary gene or diseases, right? And my family said no one has that kind of diseases or sign or symptom. Only myself have that. That's how I started to read more about overtraining, under eating, which I did. In taekwondo, as I was a taekwondo athlete, there is a weight category. We were asked to maintain our weight in order to compete in a certain weight category. So imagine if you are young and you're still growing, even if you're a teenager, you're still growing. But if you started with a certain category and you want competition in that category, you will ask to maintain the weight, even though your body is still growing. So in order to maintain the weight, you have to like train a lot, and you cannot eat too much. I think it's similar to gymnastics maybe, or other sports. That's how we push ourselves beyond our physical body that can take. And I was under eating. Yes, I had tried to lose weight. Can you imagine 10 kilogram in 2 weeks?
That's a lot.
Well, I know I pushed myself. So I knew I knew I myself is mentally strong. I know that I'm really, really strong mentally. That's why I said earlier, I just felt that my body just cannot follow my mind. Like sometimes your mind can go really fast. Your mind is really strong. You think that you can do it, but just your body just cannot follow. And that's how I felt. So yeah, I was under eating and overtraining for sure. I trained. I'm not so sure about overtraining, but I train, but the nutrition, they don't come along side by side. You train, maybe you train 3 times a day, but you only eat once a day, for example. Even though the training 3 times a day may not be overtraining for some coaches, but because of your under eating, then it affects the hormone. Then I realized I should eat more iodine. And I found out that iodine is from the sea, and I live close to the sea. I eat seafood all the time, but I still got iodine deficiency. So what do you think about eating natural food? Natural food can help that, or as an athlete, how can you avoid that hypothyroidism?
Yeah, so making sure that you're getting enough energy is the most important thing. And you do want to consider quality nutritional sources. So we always recommend that people get as much of their nutrients as possible from real food instead of relying solely on supplements. But there are times in which you might be really low in something where a supplement is necessary to help give you kind of a boost and get you up to a safer level. And then usually, I'll recommend that people take a supplement for a while. And then once they get close to that sort of ideal line, then we'll take the supplement away and kind of let them cross the finish line into that ideal range for a nutrient using real foods, because it's really difficult to create a toxicity from food sources. Our bodies are really good at about absorbing kind of how much they need from foods, and usually foods don't have a really high amount of any single nutrient in them that could be potentially harmful. But it's a lot easier to overdo a nutrient in terms of your intake with supplements. And so by using a combination of real food and supplements where they're necessary, you can really create a nice sort of ideal range of nutrients for you to get you into that kind of happy place where your body is doing its best. But, in terms of like your situation, yeah, it definitely sounds like you weren't getting enough fuel for your training. I recommend that my athletes that I work with in my private practice eat at least 4 meals a day, because when you're training, you have higher nutritional needs. And so it's not really feasible to get all of the nutrients you need just in 3 meals. And so adding a 4th meal or multiple snacks throughout the day can be a really nice strategy to help you meet those needs that you've kind of increased because of your training.
So how about iodine from the kelp? Does it help?
Yeah, I think that, kelp and seaweed is a really good source of iodine. You can also use iodized salt. So just like regular table salt has iodine added to it. If you're using like sea salt, that doesn't have any iodine added to it, so it's not going to be quite as good of a source. So you could certainly use, kelp, seaweed, other things like that to help bring that level up. But you might, depending on your level, you might need a supplement or using iodized salts.
Iodized salt, yes, I was asked to take that as well. Interesting, like in Malaysia, we call it iodine. Yeah, in English, we say iodine.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I say iodine and you say iodine. It's the same thing. And I checked the online information. Olympic sprinter Gail Devers.
Yeah.
she talked about her hypothyroidism.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice, I think, as an athlete to see other athletes who might be going through or have gone something similar to you. You know, it's kind of comforting to know that you're not alone and that there are other people who have gone through this. So I think it's great when other athletes can connect with, or if they can't contact them, but just to know that they're out there and to kind of feel like they're, part of a community instead of going through something, in isolation.
Yeah, it's good to know now. But at that time, when I was told about the hypothyroidism, I knew nobody who had this kind of symptom or sign. I don't know if I should call it disease, but now they call it thyroid disease. Yeah, you felt so lonely and you felt so helpless, and you just go with the advice from the doctor. So if you know someone is out there, especially the high performance athlete, have the similar thyroid issues, then you don't feel that lonely, especially when you read this article about Gail Devers. She's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist in track and field. She's the national spokesperson for Gland Central, a nationwide public health education campaign for the American Medical Women's Association. Yeah, she's considered one of the best sprinters in the US history. So I read and then I thought about it. I'm sure she trains really hard. Yeah, I'm sure she may not know much about this nutritional science or exercise physiology. Otherwise, perhaps she could perform better. I don't know. That's my assumption. That's my opinion about it. What do you think about it?
Yeah, and it's really fun to work with athletes because, sometimes athletes come to us and they don't have any signs or symptoms and they're like, I think I feel pretty good. And we see that there are some things that are, maybe outside that ideal range, and we can modify those to get them into that ideal range. And then they're like, oh, wow, like I'm performing and I'm feeling so much better. And I didn't even think that I was feeling bad before. So, there's usually a lot of things that we can work on. I've been doing this for years and I've never seen anyone with a perfect blood test. There's always at least something that might be out of range. Some are, have more things to work on than others, but usually that there's something that you might be missing or, low or high in. And so, I like to tell my athletes there's always a next level. And so we want to make sure that everyone's kind of feeling their best with what they're doing.
That's really, really fascinating to hear that. You were saying you always see something and that you don't see many perfect blood sample within the high performance athlete. So can I say that we actually may see more normal blood sample in recreational athlete or a regular population than the high performance athlete? Can I say that? Like the high performance athlete, somehow their blood sample are not consistently similar or normal, relatively or comparing with the general population.
So one thing to keep in mind is at athlete blood test, you have the standard range. So like if you go to your doctor, they're going to have like a standard range, but then we also have the athlete ideal range. And this is based off of over a decade of research that's been collected on athletes to kind of identify what's ideal for an athlete. So if you go to the doctor, they're going to compare you to the general population who is sedentary. And so your doctor might say, oh, Sarah, you have just, your iron level is fine. It's within the normal range. You're good to go. And that might be true if you're just kind of sitting at a desk all day and not being physically active. But for someone who's training and someone who's an athlete, that kind of normal iron might not be ideal for what they're training in terms of their load and their volume. So that's why we have kind of the standard range that you'll see on the blood panel, but then also the athlete ideal range. And so it's really that athlete ideal range that you want to be in to make sure that you are getting what you need for your training. And this is going to change depending on, your age. Are you male? Are you female? What sport are you doing? How many hours a week are you training? Those types of things are going to determine kind of what that ideal might be. So it's really important to take that into consideration. So I don't necessarily think that the elite athletes are, not as good about their blood work, but it's just that they have much higher demands. And so it's a little bit harder for them to meet all of those needs. But we do see that it's possible to get people into that ideal range for those key biomarkers with a few blood tests to make sure that they have kind of an idea of what they need to be working on. So for example, if you're low in folate, you wouldn't necessarily know that, but after a blood test, you might say, okay, I'm going to start taking a folic acid supplement and eating more leafy green vegetables. So you can kind of start to change things to sort of optimize your performance and how you're feeling.
That is really, really good info to know. So can I say that for athlete, their range are different than the regular general population? Just because they are athlete, we may expect them to have a higher level iron, higher level iodine, and etc. Like so on. Like if their standard, they have a different level of standard. If they want to meet, like because of their high level of training and high level performance, they need to have a little bit higher range of percentage than the regular people, regular general.
Yeah. Some biomarkers, there is a difference. Some are the same. So there's no difference between the general population and athletes, but for a lot of the biomarkers, there is a difference. And so if you get a blood test, you can see directly on the report, sort of like the standard range, and then also the athlete ideal range. So you can kind of see the difference in how like, oh yeah, that's a little bit higher for athletes. They need a little bit more of that. Or this one's lower. They might need less than the average population. So it's really kind of fun to see and compare them between athlete ideal and sort of the general population.
Good. That's well, hopefully athletes out there or coaches out there, if you're listening, you may want to pay more attention to this. It will be really, really beneficial to your team. So for me, I have another questions. I know some athletes, because of their high performance training, and they tend to have a high tolerance of pain, right? So if anything happened to their body, they may not know, just like what you mentioned. They train so hard and they didn't know that they have issue with their thyroid until at the later stage. I do experience that. I have a very high tolerance of pain. I didn't feel any headline fracture or any injury until I see it myself and blood came out, and then I felt like, oh, I have blood, and then I realized, oh yeah, I hurt myself because of my tolerance of pain. I said that because I did many testing. People said that I have a very high tolerance of pain. I experienced myself. I fractured my fibula bone. It was hairline fracture. I didn't feel it until I saw blood came out, and it's covered up. It's like internal bleeding in my leg, and I saw blood all over inside my leg. And I went for X-ray, and the doctor said I had hairline fracture. I didn't feel much about it actually. Yeah, that's how it is. I'm sure many athletes, they actually experience the same thing because they train so hard and they tend to have high tolerance of pain, even though they didn't know they may be injured inside, or maybe they already developed certain diseases. What do you think about it?
Yeah. And so you bring up a really good point that you might not necessarily notice that something is off because they're trained in a lot of ways to kind of push past that discomfort or that pain. But you want to be mindful too, as an athlete, that, pain and, discomfort is, especially pain, your body's trying to tell you something. And so if you're chronically fatigued, if you're always feeling like you're not at the strength where you were before, if you feel like something is off, chances are that it is. And so you do want to make sure that you get things checked out to make sure that you have what you need, because it is something that you want to be mindful of. You only have one body, and so you want to take care of it. And so if you do feel like there's something off, that chances are that there is. And a lot of times we see biomarkers that are out of range and people don't even have symptoms yet. So if you're starting to feel symptomatic, that can mean that things are a little bit farther out of that ideal range, because that's kind of your body's last ditch effort to say like, hey, pay attention, like you need to change something.
Yeah, that's why it is so important to go for blood tests, because from blood tests you may see more detailed information, more than how you feel about your body. Sometimes because you have high tolerance of pain, just because you have high tolerance of pain due to the long hours of training and competition that train you to, you already trained to, take the pain. You have to feel the discomfort in your body. You are so so used to that kind of discomfort to your body, and you may ignore certain sign and symptom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why it is important to go for blood tests to see more detail, right? So
Exactly.
I do encourage athletes and coaches to pay more attention to that. I do encourage that, and I do believe we were trained, and as an athlete or as a high performance athlete, we were trained to endure pain, because we have to endure pain. The training is really painful, especially you are at the high performance. You have to push yourself even though you're really, really tired. You know that by pushing yourself, you actually improve your mental strength. And sometimes training physiologically is very, very tiring. But we also learn that in terms of principle of training, in order to improve, you have to overload yourself. Overloading in terms of physical training, like weight training, right? In terms of weight training, you have to push up to a level that you cannot push anymore. I mean, that is the kind of principle of training, overloading.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of principle, you already trained to endure pain, to endure discomfort, and you may not know what is actually happening inside your body. So I think it's really, really important to go for blood tests. Yeah. So from your experience, who should we go to for blood tests? Should we go to our family doctor? Do you think they will understand? Should we go to a specialist, or should we go for, I don't know, consultant or agency, sports medicine or sports center, something like that? Yeah.
So it's a good question. And so this is part of why our founder, Dr. Rock, started athletebloodtest.com, is because he didn't feel like there was really a good place for athletes to have their blood work interpreted from an athletic standpoint. So if you go to your doctor, they're not trained to look at your blood work from a performance standpoint. They're looking for disease and deficiency. They want to make sure that you're a healthy person, not necessarily how you're performing in your sport. And so that's why I recommend that my athletes go through athletebloodtest.com, is because it's based on over 10 years of research looking purely at athletic performance and athlete health based on, all of this data that they've collected. And so, by going to just kind of your average physician, they're doing their job, but you're asking them to do something that's kind of outside of their job in terms of performance interpretation of the blood. And so, by going through athletebloodtest.com, you get that, and vice versa. Like, we wouldn't recommend people go to athletebloodtest.com if they're feeling sick and they want to know, is there something wrong, right? Like, we're not a medical provider. So you want to make sure that you're using sort of each resource appropriately. And if you don't have access to athletebloodtest.com, if they're overseas, if they're in another country, then I would recommend going with like a sports medicine doctor who's going to have more of that athletic eye than just sort of a general care physician, or someone that's not trained in sports medicine.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's really good advice. Sometimes I went to my family doctor and asked, should I do this test? And then my family doctor will ask why.
And
want to if my liver is okay. Doctor, should I do testing for my gallbladder? Should I do testing for my heart? Should I do testing for my lung? That's how detailed I ask. Should I do this? Should I do that? And sometimes I think the family doctor think that I think too much and overweight myself. Yeah, that's a good advice. You should go for a special center, right? Sports medicine or sports center, like you mentioned, the athlete blood test center. That's a very, very good information to have. So my other question is, the reason why we need to do blood tests is similar to the reason why we need to do X-ray. Like for X-ray, for me, if it's not because of X-ray, I didn't know that I had headline fracture because I don't feel it. I didn't feel the pain. I only see internal bleeding. I only see internal bleeding appear in my, like, underneath my skin or leg. And I only found out that I had headline fracture through X-ray. So I'm sure similar to blood tests, you don't know what is your issues or what kind of deficiency that you may have. Maybe iodine, or maybe iron, or maybe vitamin D. yeah, you will not know until you do a blood test or the blood test.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. If you're listening out there, remember blood test is similar to, I would say, for my opinion, I think blood test is similar to X-ray. Without X-ray, I would not know that I had headline fracture. So similarly, if you don't do blood test, you may not know what kind of micronutrients that you need more of. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, Dr. Robbie, I would like to know, do you recommend athletes to take extra or nutritional supplement? If yes, do you have any specific method or specific product that a certain sports athlete should take more of one thing than the other athlete? For example, like long distance runner, should they take more protein powder than the taekwondo athlete, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of like micronutrients, so vitamins and minerals, I don't recommend that athletes take any supplements until they've had blood work done, because blind supplementation can be really dangerous. You can really throw off some of your biochemistry by taking too much of one supplement and getting too much of a certain nutrient. So, we only recommend supplements if we see there's a need based on the blood work. But in terms of like, performance supplements outside of, nutrition, I generally recommend that most athletes take a creatine monohydrate, whether they're weightlifting or if they're running. There's been a lot of research done on creatine and shown some really nice benefits in terms of bone health, muscle health, even brain health has been shown to be improved with creatine. So that's kind of a ubiquitous one that I recommend. Another one is collagen. That can really help with connective tissue and to make sure that those tendons and ligaments have the best integrity that they can. So those are two that I think a lot of athletes would benefit from. And outside of that, it kind of depends on the sport. Usually if they're doing like a power sport, so like powerlifting, weightlifting, something like that, they might need a higher protein intake than someone who is doing less of a power sport that's not going to need so much of that muscle building or muscle strength. So, a dancer might not need as much protein as, say, like a football player who's lifting weights. So it's hard to say that certain sports would need, specific supplements. It really just depends on the person and sort of where their body's at and what their training needs are.
Yeah, good to know. So if you don't do a lot of power training, you may not take as much protein powder than those who carry weights, for example, right? So how about creatine? You mentioned about it. Would like to know more about it. Is that creatin? How to spell that nutrient?
Yeah, I think it's creatine. Yeah, so creatine monohydrate, you'll see it sometimes. And it's nice because there really aren't side effects from it, but there are a lot of benefits based on the research that we've seen. And so, it's just like a tasteless, odorless powder. You can get flavored ones, I think, but I just take a plain one and I'll add it in smoothies. My parents put it in their coffee in the morning. So even if they're not athletes, I still usually recommend people take it because there are some other benefits from it. And it's really inexpensive too. A lot of supplements can be pretty expensive, but creatine is really cheap. It's very easy to get. You can just buy it online. And it's really safe to take. So just 1 teaspoon a day is kind of enough to get those benefits in.
Good to know. So I think as a taekwondo athlete, I wish I know all this, and I should have taken protein powder, creatine, and what's the other one besides creatine?
Collagen.
Collagen. Yeah, I know the importance of collagen. For many communities, they like to cook. What do you call that? Pork or beef soup. Like the bone.
Yeah.
Animal soup. They said that animal bone soup have a lot of collagen, and my family used to cook that. But then nowadays people think that is too fatty. A lot of fat.
Yeah.
We were told that it's good. Fat is good for you.
Yeah.
So about cooking bone soup.
Yeah, bone broth is popular now too.
But it's kind of fattening, right?
There can be a lot of calories in it, depending on what you put in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think we should take bone soup than the collagen supplement, or should we take collagen supplement more than the bone soup?
I mean, I just take collagen every day. I put it in my, smoothies, or if I have one. But there can be a lot of other nutrients in the, bone broth or the bone soup too. So I would say probably mixing it up would be beneficial, because you're going to get more nutrients from the bone broth than you will just from the collagen supplement. But sometimes you might not feel like eating that every day. And so just taking a supplement can be helpful.
Yeah, that's good to know. I'm going to start looking for collagen. Do you have any advice for taekwondo athletes? Like taekwondo athlete, they do weight training, they do a lot of explosive training, plyometric training, jumping up and down, because the kick, they have to be explosive. When you have to be like bomb, like bomb, sudden kick, it has to be explosive because you need speed. Otherwise, people can see your kick. If people can see your kick, you will not be able to score. If I can see your kick, I can run away before you kick me, right? So they be really fast and bomb explosive. In order to have a fast movement, it has to be explosive. It's like sprinting, right? Otherwise, kick high and people can see there's no speed and there's no explosive power. So what do you think? Should they take protein powder?
I would recommend getting as much protein from real food sources as possible, because when you eat, meat or eggs or dairy or fish, or, even plant sources of protein, beans, nuts, that sort of thing, soybeans, they're going to come with a lot of other nutrients too. Whereas with a protein powder, you're not really getting a whole lot of other nutrients. So it can kind of, decrease your intake of certain nutrients. So better off to get as much as possible from real food. And then if you need, a protein shake on top of that to sort of supplement, then I think that's fine. I don't think that protein powder is a bad thing, but just trying to get as much as you can from real food is helpful. I would make sure that they're eating enough carbohydrates, because like you said, it's very explosive. And with some of these high intense exercises, they're going to need carbohydrate for their fuel. And so having a low carb diet can kind of hold them back from a performance standpoint. So making sure that they're getting enough starchy foods with all of their meals, and then eating, several times a day throughout the day to make sure that they're getting nutrients on a consistent basis, and they're not going too long of a period without eating is really important for them.
Good to know. I know at taekwondo athlete also, they want, or they are always asked to maintain their weight. Athlete, they on diet all the time. Do you have any advice for them, like how to lose weight healthily? I know I was not taught the healthy way. I starve myself, and for me, I starve myself. I don't eat and I don't drink, especially before the weigh-in. I dehydrate myself. I don't think that was good advice. No one advised me. We were told that, okay, I have to lose weight. What should I do? What should I look? How can I lose my extra weight or pound? And the old method is like, don't eat. When you don't eat, then you can lose weight. Yeah. So what is your advice for the athlete that have the weight category?
It can be really tough managing a weight category. I would say definitely you want to work with your coach, and, don't necessarily be afraid to go up a weight class, because if that means that you're able to eat more and be better fueled and be stronger, then I think your chances of winning at a higher weight class are better than if you're really malnourished and, fatigued and worn out and tired at a depleted state, but you're still able to make a lower weight class. So I think there's kind of this misconception that like you always want to compete at the lowest weight class possible. And I understand that
you are the bigger, you are the tallest, you are the bigger, biggest in your weight.
Yeah, exactly. So I see where that's coming from, but you don't want to underestimate the power of proper fueling, and because your fuel is going to give you your strength. So trying to eat as much kind of nourishing food as possible to try to get those nutrients in, so you can really, feel your best and do your best in your competitions without being, low in certain nutrients and energy overall, I think is so important for them.
Exactly. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. It is so important to have strong muscle and feel more comfortable with your body, with your weight category. That's why I actually went to heavyweight. Before, when I first started as an athlete, I started with the lighter weight. It was called featherweight. At that time, taekwondo have 8 weight category, from fin, fly, I'm going from the lightest to the heaviest. So from
Okay.
fly, bantam, feather, light, welter, middle, heavy. So 8 weight category. At that time, in my time, there are 8 weight categories in the female taekwondo competition. At that time, it's only the sparring. It's a full tag. So imagine like from fin, fly, bantam, I was in feather, the fourth lightest. I was in feather. I started in feather. I said started in bantam, and then as a kid, I grew, right? So bantam feather, I started feather, and I represented the country in featherweight, and I was still growing. And then I jumped to lightweight because I was growing. I wasn't able. It's very hard for me to maintain my featherweight, so I went to lightweight. I won championship, but then from lightweight, I trained so hard because at that time I trained so hard to maintain my featherweight. I could not. Then I went to lightweight. At that time, I think I already sort of damaged my body system. So it was really hard for me to maintain my weight in lightweight then, right? From lightweight, I already jumped from featherweight, bantam feather, lightweight. Now I had to go to welterweight, but I felt that even in welterweight, I actually easily gain weight. I suspected that at that time my hypothyroidism started to kick in, but I didn't know that. I gained weight easily. I felt tired easily, and I gained weight easily without eating much. But that's how I decided. I say, no more. I told myself I don't want to go through that painful experience anymore. I didn't want to starve myself. I didn't want to force myself not to drink water. I didn't want to go on hard diet for not eating my favorite food. I like to eat a lot. So I feel hungry all the time. And at that time I told myself, that's it, no more. I go to heaviest weight, the heaviest one. Can you imagine? Like I jump from from lightweight, I jump welterweight, I jump middleweight, I went all the way to heavyweight, and no one at that time, only 2 people believed that I could do it. But most of the people did not believe that I could make it to heavyweight and won the championships. Because I don't blame them, because no one had been there. No one has ever wanted to go to heavyweight, especially if you're a female. If you say I'm female, I'm in heavyweight, people think that you're big size and you're fat, you're big and you're clumsy. That's how it is. And people think heavyweight, what heavyweight, you're big and clumsy. I didn't think much about it. I told myself, that's it. I wanted to enjoy my food. I love to eat, and I also love to, and I feel so good. Oh, heavyweight. I look at all my athletes and my my team members. They were working hard. They were on diet. For me, they always look at me enjoying my food. Then even though I look bigger than before, and some of the coaches say, Sarah, you gain weight. You look fat now. That kind of word, it doesn't really help the athlete, but I didn't care less. In my brain, I was like, I don't care about this labeling, but I just wanted to win the gold in heavyweight. I was so focused. That's how I managed to win gold medal at the Asian Championship. I was the first Malaysian to actually best the world champion, the Korean athlete, also world champion. So that's my story, and I feel so good. I feel so strong, even though I was always the shortest, actually. Was always the shortest. In my heavyweight, imagine heavyweight people tends to be tall. They're tall and big, and otherwise maybe tall and big. Sometimes people call it fat, and generally they are a bit slower than the finweight. The finweight, they are lightest, right? They're fast. When they kick, they're really fast, of course, because they're shorter and they're lightest. And the heavyweight, their speed is not as fast. People tend to have that kind of mentality. So I just want to share my experience that when I changed my mentality and changed my weight category from lightweight to heavyweight, I jumped like 2-3 weight above. I feel so good.
I love that.
I feel so good. I feel so happy. I can eat all kinds of food. No one could tell me that you cannot eat this, you cannot eat that. And when I do my training, I feel so strong. I feel like, I feel so strong. That's why I could won the competition, even though I was the shortest. If you check my profile online, the picture at that time, they didn't take much video. I wish I could have that video clip, but I do have the picture. But from the picture, you will see that I'm actually the shortest, but I won. Yeah,
that is such a great story. Good for you. Congratulations. I think that that is a perfect example that, just because you were shorter, you were well fueled, but you had the strength to go out and win. And it's not just about being as light as you possibly can.
Yeah, yeah. I when I decided to go to heavyweight, I did a lot of weight training. I know that like to strengthen my body because heavyweight people are bigger, have like taller and the bigger size. They are stronger. So I told myself I need to have a stronger body so that I can take on the pressure. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of weight training and I ate all kinds of food and I feel so happy.
Good. Yay.
I know. I'm glad you mentioned that. You say, we don't have to maintain the weight. If you feel comfortable, you can go to the next weight category, even though you may not be the tallest in your weight category, but that's okay. Because
Yep.
competition is not the tallest can win, it's the smartest win.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just curious from your competition, since Olympics is coming, do you get more athletes going for testing at this period, at this season?
We do have a lot more athletes testing now, and we have several athletes that work with us at athletebloodtest.com who are qualified for the Olympic trials, which is really exciting. So it's important that we, make sure that we're helping them as much as we can. And so it definitely gets a little bit busier now, kind of in the summertime when, people are running marathons and doing triathlons and more kind of endurance sports now that are outdoors during the summer times.
Wow, wow. So if an athlete find out that there's issue with their blood sample, do you think they have the time to catch up? How soon they can catch up with the blood sample so that they meet the healthy or the not only the healthy range but also the high performance range?
Yeah, so we usually recommend they get tested 6 weeks before their kind of a race or their big competition. So if anyone is, going to the Olympics, then you would want to make sure that they're testing 6 weeks beforehand. So that gives us enough time to change anything with their nutrition, with their supplements, maybe recovery, training, that sort of thing to get them into the ideal range.
Can they catch up within 6 weeks after the blood sample test?
Yeah, 6 weeks should be enough time to make those changes to get them kind of where they want to be or where they need to be.
Oh, 6 weeks. So 6 weeks before the competition, they should check. That's a good information. So if you're athlete or coaches out there, listen to this important statement. 6 weeks before, I think that's minimum, right? Minimum 6 weeks before you should go for a test. And if you find out you have deficiency in certain nutrients or micronutrients, I think you still have time to catch up. Correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So can they go earlier than 6 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, you can go at any point, and it would probably be best if they get a baseline test before that 6 weeks, and then 6 weeks before the competition, they can kind of do a little check-in to see where they're at for some of those key micronutrients and other biomarkers to sort of modify those. And so that gives you a little bit more time to make changes if you're seriously outside that ideal range for some biomarkers.
So what is the difference between biomarkers and micronutrients, and what are they?
Yeah, that's a great question. So nutrients essentially are biomarkers. So biomarker is something in your body that's going to sort of be a proxy or look at something that could change within the body. And so we look at different hormones, micronutrients. These are all going to be what we would call a biomarker. And so this is basically something that can stand for a point in health and that could change based on how your body is active or inactive.
So as a coaches, not as a coach, as for coaches, what is your advice to them? How can they take care of their athletes?
I would make sure that they're, eating enough, I think is one of the big things. Depending on the sport, it can be really difficult to eat enough to keep up with their strength and their energy needs. So encouraging them to eat kind of a few hours before their practice and then Eating right after their practice is also really important. Making sure that they're getting at least 1 day off a week to help bring some of that cortisol or some of that stress hormone down. That's really important. And then keeping an eye on them to make sure that you don't notice any big changes in terms of their energy or their performance. I was recently working with a soccer coach who noticed one of his players was suddenly not quite performing as well as she was before. And so I started working with her, and we figured out that there were some issues with her nutrition. And since then, we've kind of gotten her back up to speed in terms of what she is capable of doing. So I think just being cognizant and vigilant with your athletes and making sure that you have a pulse on kind of how they're performing. And if you see anyone start to suffer or kind of decline, make sure that you talk to them and get them the help that they need.
Wow. Then how about, what is your advice for athletes? The high performance athlete or the regular athlete as well?
Yeah, and I would say similarly, making sure that they're eating enough, getting enough, real nutrient dense foods, because they do have higher nutrient needs. And I mentioned earlier, having at least 4 meals a day is really important. I don't think that athletes can get all of the nutrients that they need to support their body and training by just having 3 meals a day. So including several snacks or another meal throughout the day is really important. Make sure that they're getting enough, and also being in tune with your body. So if you start to feel really tired all the time, if you're not quite as strong as you were, or you're noticing some changes, make sure that you follow up, get some blood work done, talk to your coach, talk to a sports medicine doctor to make sure that there's nothing going on, because your body doesn't just change without a reason. There's something going on, and you want to make sure that you understand what is going on. And also making sure that you're just getting enough sleep. So taking at least 1 recovery day, and then getting, I would say, at least 8 hours of sleep every night. And taking care of your body, trying to manage some stress is really important.
Wow. And so for blood tests, if the athlete asks, is there any specific blood test that they should or highly recommend to take? I know there are many, there are a list of blood tests. So what is the important element? What is the most important blood test that you think every athlete should take?
Like I said, I would recommend starting with the gold panel, because that is going to give you the biggest kind of comprehensive look at your blood, and it'll give you a lot of good information.
For athletes do you serve all the countries in the world, or how about athletes that are not, that may not have access to the services? How should they obtain the blood test? Should they go to the family doctor? Do you think the family doctor will listen to them?
You can try. I don't think that the family doctors are trained to analyze the blood from a performance standpoint, but it's going to be better than nothing at all. And so, maybe they are anemic, for example, and their iron is really low. That would still come up on the blood test. So I would still say, if you don't have access to a sports medicine doctor or like a training facility or something else, and your choice is either nothing or going to your primary care physician, I would go with that, because they'll at least be able to check things to make sure that overall you have sound health. And that's a good starting point for any athlete.
Wow. So if they go to the family doctor in their own countries, and what kind of, let's say they do not have access to website, or they have access to website and they may not understand the gold panel. So what should they tell the family doctor? What kind of sample should they take? For example, for me, when I ask my family doctor for a specific blood test, I would say, family doctor, should I have my sample test for sugar level? Should I have my blood test to test my liver, to test my kidney, for example? Like, what should they tell the family doctor? What kind of blood test they should take?
Yeah, so I would try to get what's called a CBC, or complete blood count.
CBC.
Yep, so get a CBC, so taking a look at all of your red blood cell indicators. So looking at the size, the shape, the number, those types of things with your red blood cells. Also looking at iron is really important. I would also look at cortisol if you can. And then the vitamins I would recommend are folate, B12, and vitamin D. Those would all be really important.
Okay, what is folate?
So folate is B9. It's a type of B vitamin, and it's really important for red blood cell production and healthy size cells.
Sounds like vitamin B complex. How about vitamin B complex? Should the athlete take vitamin B complex that will include all the folate, B12, and all that?
Yeah, so I would recommend getting their B12 level checked, because even though B12 is a B vitamin, it can actually accumulate in the liver. And so you do see some athletes who have high levels of vitamin B12. And so you want to make sure that you're not adding and getting to kind of an unhealthy high level of B12. But assuming that they don't, then yeah, you could definitely take a B complex to make sure you're getting all the B vitamins.
Wow. So if you're listening out there, make sure you check the link down below inside the description. Check for the gold panel. Do leave us a comment if you have any questions. We are here to help you, and we are here, especially me, I will personally reply your message. And before I go further, or before I end this interview or fun time chat, I have another question. For collagens, if you see combat sports, mixed martial arts, karate, taekwondo, and all the jujitsu, they really contact, like physical contact, like really, kick your body or kick your head or kick your hand or kick your the target and kick your leg. It's actually full contact. Do you think they should take more collagen? Because as you mentioned, collagen is to build the muscle, and the cell, something like that.
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily need to take above and beyond, because your body can only use so much. So I would recommend taking, I would say, between 15 and 20 grams per day. And you can take that with a vitamin C to help improve the absorption of that. So that should be sufficient for them.
So 15
grams.
50 grams of collagen every day?
Yep.
Okay, good to know. I know as a taekwondo athlete or martial artist myself, full contact is just part of the game. Sometimes if you're not used to it, you get bruises all the time. So how can you reduce or avoid the bruises?
With the bruises, again, making sure that you have all of the right sort of red blood cell ideal ranges is important. Because sometimes your red blood cells can burst open a little more easily, especially if you're low in iron. So making sure that you have, healthy red blood cells is going to be the key to that. Unfortunately, there isn't like a supplement or something that's really easy to help, eliminate or reduce bruising. I think that's just some of what comes along with the territory.
Well, I really appreciate your sharing and your knowledge, and your skills today. And I really appreciate that you actually really mentioned the tips, the theory behind it, and the micronutrient or the supplement that we should take at different stages of athletic training and competition. And I really appreciate that you mentioned for certain athletes, they may take more maybe iron, or maybe protein powder, or maybe creatine, or maybe collagen. And that's all for today. And do you have anything, the last advice for the athlete and coaches before we hang up?
Just enjoy your sport. I hope that everyone is enjoying either coaching or participating. Life is fairly short, so I hope that people are having fun with it and don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, enjoy. That's really true. At certain time when you reach a certain level, talking from my experience, actually that when you don't enjoy, you will lose the passion. And I've been there. When I did not enjoy my competition, I actually wanted to quit. I wanted to retire early, but I endure on because of your passion, because you have your motivation. So remember, always refer to your why your purpose of joining competition and training. Of course, you have your own motivation, sometimes maybe external motivation and sometimes maybe internal motivation. So that's all for today. I really appreciate for those who are listening, and make sure you pay attention to what Dr. Robbie was saying, and make sure you check the description for more detail and click on the link for more information. And I appreciate you and thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Robbie. And we
Thank you,
hope
Sarah.
time. Take care. Bye. By the way, before I hang up, remember to share with your friends if you think this is really helpful. And remember to share with your coaches, your athlete, and also click like. And we really appreciate you. Take care. Bye-bye.